You stand in the middle of an open field at dawn, surrounded by a silence so complete it almost feels unnatural. The grass barely moves, the sky is pale and waiting. There is no enemy in sight, no threat on the horizon, and yet something in the air feels heavy enough to press against your chest. It is the kind of stillness a man mistakes for safety, but a seasoned warrior knows it as the quiet season before the storm. In these moments, a man either sharpens his spirit or slowly forgets he has one. Peace has a way of singing a soft lullaby, and if you let it, the melody can make you blind to the weight you once carried with pride. You look at your own life and realize how easily routines become cages, how comfort, repeated enough times, becomes a kind of slow suffocation. You wake, work, rest, and repeat, until the pulse inside you starts to dull. You stop noticing the instincts that once kept you sharp. Your reactions soften, your ambition fades at the edges. The world around you tells you you're safe, but inside, something ancient begins to rust. A man wasn't built for endless softness. Even in peace, he was meant to feel the pressure of his own potential. Musashi understood this with a clarity most men never reach. He knew that peace was a battlefield in disguise, not because of external enemies, but because of the internal ones that grow strongest when life is quiet. In storms, a man is forced to rise, but in calm seasons, he drifts. And drifting is what destroys him. You feel it, even if you haven't spoken it. The sense that something inside you has gone quiet, not dead, but waiting for you to remember that your edge requires maintenance, even when the world is still. Because the moment chaos returns, and it always does, the man who trained in peace will stand. The man who didn't will break. A blade never loses its sharpness in a single moment. It dulls through neglect slowly, quietly, invisibly. At first, the metal looks fine. The surface still gleams. The warrior still assumes it can cut. But if he looks closer, he'll see the tiny spots of rust forming in places the light doesn't reach. That is how a man decays. Not through catastrophe, but through little abandonments of himself. A missed promise here, a delayed discipline there, a silent compromise that he tells himself doesn't matter. Peace accelerates this weakness. It sedates the very fire that keeps a man awake inside. When danger is present, something primal forces him to straighten his spine. But when the world grows quiet, he slides into softness without realizing it. You can go years thinking you are still strong, still sharp, still capable, only to discover you've been corroding from the inside. Men collapse under simple adversity, not because the adversity is great, but because their inner walls were already rotting long before the challenge arrived. Warriors of old understood a truth that modern men forget. The time to train hardest is when no threat is visible. That is when complacency hunts you. That is when the unseen rust spreads across the soul. They swung their blades when the villagers slept. They hardened their bodies under the moonlight. They refused softness because they knew softness would demand blood later. Today, men lose their tempers in traffic, drown in minor disappointments, spiral from small failures, not because the world is cruel, but because they've lived too long without testing themselves. They believe peace means they can afford to relax every principle, but the world never warns you before it tests you. Life simply strikes, and in that moment, you either bleed, or you break, or you rise. The outcome depends entirely on whether you allowed rust to form during the quiet times, when you thought no one was watching. Deep inside you, beneath the layers of politeness and routine, there is a wolf you've kept caged for years. It does not howl, it does not scratch, it simply waits, watching you with patient eyes, hungry, not for violence but for purpose. Modern life teaches you to fear this creature, to declaw yourself, to soften your voice and shrink your presence. You were told that danger is brutality, that strength is aggression, that capability makes you threatening. And so you starved the wolf, thinking that doing so made you civilized. But the wolf was never a monster. It was the part of you that knows how to endure, the part that stands tall when the world trembles, the part that refuses to collapse when everything around you fractures. Peace convinces men that they don't need this creature anymore, that obedience and compliance are safer than courage. But peace lies. Peace is temporary, and life has a way of burning down the walls you thought would protect you. When that fire comes, the man who denied his own strength is left with nothing but regret. Musashi understood danger not as bloodlust, but as capability. He believed a dangerous man was not the one who sought conflict, but the one who could walk into conflict without trembling. A man who avoids becoming dangerous becomes a burden to himself. He becomes helpless in the face of pressure. He becomes afraid of his own reflection. He loses the instinct to defend what matters because he has forgotten that he was born with the capacity to do so. But when you feed the inner consistently, without arrogance, you return to your natural shape. You become someone who doesn't panic when storms rise, someone who holds his ground when others collapse, someone who is calm not because he is weak, but because he remembers what he's capable of. Peace may quiet the world around you, but the wolf within you should never be allowed to sleep. There is a certain kind of training that only happens in silence. Late nights when the world is asleep and you're left alone with the rhythm of your breath and the steady pulse of your determination. No audience, no applause, no validation, just you, your commitment, and the echo of your own effort. These moments feel small and forgettable, but they are where the foundation of a dangerous man is built. In stillness, in solitude, in the discipline no one sees, Musashi walked the world alone, carrying nothing but his weapons, his purpose, and a discipline fierce enough to carve his name into eternity. There were no crowds cheering him through endless nights of training. There were no promises of reward. He trained because a warrior must, because strength is not a performance, it is a responsibility. Men today crave acknowledgement. They want praise for every step, recognition for every effort, reassurance for every attempt. But this hunger for approval weakens the spine. It makes a man dependent on the eyes of others to define his worth. Training when no one is watching is the purest form of power. It means your discipline comes from your core, not your ego. It means you sharpen yourself because you understand the cost of neglect. It means you are willing to suffer for a version of yourself that no one else may ever fully see. That is where danger is forged, not in public spectacle, but in private consistency. When you choose to train in silence, you become someone the world cannot predict. Someone who surprises even himself with what he can endure. Someone who stands ready not because he seeks conflict, but because he refuses to be caught unprepared. The man who sharpens alone in the dark becomes the man who stands firm in the light. He becomes dangerous not through aggression, but through mastery of the self. When the world is asleep, there is a difference between a man who is dangerous because he is chaotic, and a man who is dangerous because he is calm. The first swings wildly, driven by emotion, easily manipulated by fear and anger. The second moves with quiet certainty, centered in a stillness that feels almost unshakable. Musashi knew this difference intimately. He believed the mind was a weapon sharper than any blade, and he trained it with the same intensity he gave to his sword. Peace is the season to shape this inner stillness. Not when the world is falling apart, but when nothing seems wrong. That is when your thoughts are most exposed. That is when overthinking creeps in, when anxiety slips between the cracks of your comfort, when your emotions stir without direction. Men assume calmness is natural, but calmness is trained. It is forged in the same way steel is hardened with heat, pressure, and intention. Musashi spent hours in meditation long before a duel, not to escape the world, but to command himself. He trained his breath so he could remain unmoved by fear. He learned to quiet the storms inside so he could see clearly when the world grew dark. Modern men drown in their own minds because they have never learned to anchor themselves. They chase distractions. They numb discomfort. They blame their emotions instead of mastering them. Becoming dangerous means developing a mind that can walk into fire without losing its shape. It means you act without tremor, not because you feel nothing, but because you refuse to be ruled by what you feel. When anxiety rises, you do not retreat. When pressure tightens, you do not collapse. When uncertainty looms, you remain steady. A calm mind is the greatest shield a man can carry. It makes him unbreakable not by force, but by clarity. And clarity, in a chaotic world, is a rare and dangerous thing. There has never been a time in human history when harmlessness was a virtue. Only in modern comfort has the idea taken root that a man should strive to be simple, agreeable, and but the world does not bow to the harmless. It does not reward the unprepared. It respects the man who has built himself into someone capable, steady, and formidable even if he never raises a hand in violence. Ancient warriors were feared not for their brutality, but for the undeniable presence they carried. A presence that came from strength, readiness, and a mastery of the self. Peace tricks men into believing that softness is moral, that weakness is kindness, that neutrality is noble. But kindness only has meaning when it is backed by strength. Mercy only matters when it is a choice, not a necessity. A man who is harmless is not peaceful. He is merely incapable of defending himself or those he loves. He is at the mercy of circumstances, hoping the world will spare him because he means well. But the world does not operate on goodwill. It operates on preparation. Musashi lived in a world where unpreparedness meant death. He understood that strength was not an option, it was a requirement, not to dominate others, but to ensure one's own survival and dignity. That truth has not changed. A dangerous man is simply a prepared man, someone who has trained his body, sharpened his mind, tempered his emotions, and refined his spirit. Someone who can face adversity without breaking. Someone who does not rely on luck to survive. You feel the truth of this in your bones. Whenever you've been unprepared in life, financially, emotionally, physically, mentally, you've paid a price for it. Weakness invites exploitation. Hesitation invites loss. But when you are prepared, the world moves differently around you. People sense something in your presence. They treat you differently, not out of fear, but out of recognition. They see a man who has not surrendered to the softness of peace, a man who carries quiet strength, a man who could step into chaos and still stand tall. There always comes a day when the quiet ends. Sometimes it arrives, softly, a job lost, a relationship shattered, a sudden betrayal. Sometimes it arrives violently, an accident, a crisis, a storm that tears apart everything you thought was stable. Peace, no matter how long it lasts, is always temporary. It is the breath the world takes before it screams. And when that scream comes, every man is forced to answer a single question. Who are you when peace is gone? Musashi lived as though peace could vanish overnight, because for him, it often did. His life was a series of unpredictable shifts, new enemies, new journeys, new dangers. He never waited for warnings. He never assumed tomorrow would resemble today. He trained with a certainty that one day, everything would change. And he wanted to be the kind of man who could survive the transition. Modern men make the opposite mistake. They assume stability is guaranteed. They mistake routine for safety. They assume the structures around them will hold forever. But life is not architecture, it is weather. And the weather always changes. Look at your own life. Think of the moments that broke you, the losses you didn't expect, the upheavals that caught you unprepared, the nights you felt the ground disappear beneath your feet. Those moments were not extraordinary, they were inevitable. The extraordinary part was whether you stood through them or collapsed. Peace hides the truth that chaos is always preparing its return. Quietly, patiently, without mercy. The man who sharpens himself during calm seasons becomes someone the storm cannot easily claim. He may falter, but he does not shatter. He may feel fear, but he does not lose himself. He may bleed, but he does not kneel. Preparation is not paranoia, it is respect for reality. It is the understanding that life is not gentle, and you must not be fragile. Imagine yourself again in that open field at dawn, the sky glowing, the air still, the world quiet. You stand there not as a man lulled to sleep by peace, but as a blade sharpened in silence. You are not waiting for war, but you are ready for it. Not seeking conflict, but incapable of being broken by it. The light catches your edge, and for a moment, you understand what Musashi knew. Peace is a gift, but only to the man who remains dangerous.